Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. Thanks so much for joining us. If you take a chance, head down into the show notes, see all the links, all the notes. Everything is down there. A link to our Gumroad as well. We know we got a lot of new listeners, so if you check out all those links and follow us on social media, that would be awesome. Check out our YouTube page where you get to see Ariel's pretty face, my
handsome man,
my whatever, and subscribe. And if you're listening to the podcast, you just listen to it, hit subscribe on the podcast. That helps get us into your inbox automatically on every Monday and Thursday. So today we were talking about the naysayers, Ariel. The people
it's a big topic.
Yeah, the people who think you're crazy.
I started out with this. My notes were very short, and all of a sudden I had 3 pages of and another thing, and another thing.
Yeah, and what about this?
Well, this is an important topic because it's something that happens to all of us.
I agree.
If you haven't had somebody say something less than positive about your homeschooling journey yet, you just haven't been homeschooling long enough, because somebody will at some point. At least one person, if not many,
will
it
could be
say
friends,
something.
family members, strangers.
Right.
That lady in line at the grocery store.
Yeah. The
Why
librarian.
Why aren't your children in school?
Yeah. The guy working the ski lift when you and your kids are there in the middle of a school day. Yeah. It could be literally anyone. People are just, people are tactless, first of all.
Sometimes,
so even
yes.
if they don't mean anything really rude by it, they're just, they have no filter. And some people do have very strong opinions about education and about what we're doing with our own children. So if it hasn't happened to you yet, it will. If it's already happened to you, we hope that we can give you some skills and some food for thought that you can take into the next time you have one of these encounters. Because I feel like when this happens, some lady in the grocery store always says something, and then I think later, like, I wish I could have. Oh, I wish I would have said this.
But then she would have been upset at you. How dare you? There's no standard like a double standard.
I always feel a bit ill prepared.
Yeah.
And this is the first time, even for myself, that I sat down and really thought through, like, what would I want to say to that person? Not in the moment, not when I'm like reacting and, mad that they're, just kind of invading my privacy and telling me off about my kids in the grocery store. But, what would I really want to say to that person? And this gave me a great opportunity to really think it through. So we're going to do the thought experiment with you all, and hopefully this will, give you some skills so that you've got something in your toolbox when this person says some less than kind things about your homeschooling journey.
Well, the naysayers come in all different shapes and sizes, and there's that one we've all heard. Aren't your children? You won't be well-adjusted adults.
Yeah. What about socialization?
Public school is good enough for everyone else. Why not you?
Do you really think you could be a good teacher? Do you be better than somebody who's trained to be a teacher?
Will your children make any friends outside their stuffed animals?
Homeschoolers are also weird and introverted.
You're going to be weird and unsocialized.
You're just being selfish. You're going to ruin your kids because you want to just keep them all to yourself.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. I want to keep them all to myself.
These are just some of the plethora of things somebody could say to you about your kids. And it's, it could be anyone.
We've gotten some of these before. And to be honest, we've you encounter them, and some people are a little bit more tactful, in the way they say it, but in essence, they're asking you, you're going to ruin your children.
Yeah, they're implying that we are going to harm our children, which is just such a, they feel like it's an innocent question. Well, yeah, but like, what about socialization? What about making friends? They're saying that they think that that's such a shallow question, and that's such a deep thing because basically what they're saying is you're purposely hurting your kids.
Yeah.
Do you know that? And they almost say it like that. Do you know that you're harming your own children, kind of thing?
Wait a minute. This is an epiphany. I've never thought of this before.
Right. And yeah, we've had a variety of these said to us by strangers, by friends, by family. Your mother was a big homeschooling.
She didn't know what was going on.
She was not an advocate.
But now she is.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Now she's an acolyte.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But we've experienced these. And I mean, I'm sure that there is much worse that you have heard of, having someone said to somebody or has been said to you. So
yeah, I mean, first thing is you get the motivation, right? People are going to say things. It's going to happen. You're going to get it on the forum. A lot of us are hyper online, so we're going to see some of the worst opinions out on the internet.
We can all hide behind the anonymity of our little avatar.
Exactly, and sometimes we have to realize that the online communities, those type of people, that's like a very small fraction of the real world. That most people are fairly nice and fairly respectful, but most
of the naysaying honestly comes in person. As much as there is online stuff, I feel like we can find our online communities where we can say like, okay, hey, I'm in a group of other homeschoolers. This is a safe spot. Mm-hmm. Even if I post on my personal page that we're homeschooling or something, people are usually pretty good about not like shaming me on my own post. But it's out in society, especially when we're out in the middle of the day with our kids in what should be a school day. Yeah, and we're walking around with a child who, is 6, but looks like they're 8. Yeah. Tell me how I know. 6'6" husband over here. So, people definitely.
You're going to get
it's
those.
Usually in person.
You're going to get those comments from, the strangers in the world when you're out. No, you're right. Like when you're out in the wild during a normal school day.
Right. When it's like, why is this child not in school? Everybody kind of looks at you. So, one of the things is it's really natural, just to give the naysayers, not the benefit of the doubt, that's the wrong word, but just to try to understand where they're coming from a little bit, which is, it's really natural for people to question our choice to homeschool because this is an alternative, right? Regular schooling route, that's the norm. That's what everybody does. Or even if you go private school, that's not that unusual. We're doing something fundamentally different. And it is really natural for people to want to have questions about that. Yeah. Whether they ask them in the best way or not is very debatable. But just realize, it's natural that questions are going to come up in all flavors because we are doing something fundamentally different.
Some people may interpret it as sort of an indictment on their own background or their own schooling or their own experiences.
Absolutely. Well, I was a child of public school. Yeah, I send my kids to public school. What are you saying? My education wasn't good enough? Are you saying that I'm hurting my kids because I don't homeschool them? Right? Like they glam on all of this stuff, and maybe some of that comes from their own, guilt of sending kids to school and not knowing what they're doing during the day, and whatever they I don't know if some of it's a little bit of jealousy, if it is a lot of defensiveness, definitely about what are you saying? What I did isn't good enough for my kids, right? It's like, whoa, no, I'm just saying what I want to do for my kids. I'm not making any statements about you and your family, but they do. A lot of them take it that way, and so sometimes these naysayers really come to us from a very negative place because they feel that our choice inherently
is a criticism
of them. Yeah, which is crazy.
Rejection much.
It's crazy, but they do, and so that's one of the things. The other thing is, we talked a little bit about strangers, but for those that really love and care about your kids, they may just be concerned because they don't know very much about homeschooling, or they have some preconceived notion. Oh, my brother's friend's cousin's neighbor was this weird homeschooler.
Well, that guy's kind of weird, yeah.
Right? Like it can be some far-fetched thing. We've had a lot of naysaying from people who do love and care about our kids and our family, and it did come from a place of just mostly uneducation and a little bit of of preconceived bias against homeschooling from some article that was read or relation.
I think the lack of understanding is, I think, the big thing, because they just don't know what it looks like.
No, they don't.
They think, oh, you're at home. That's kind of weird. They just don't understand what it looks like. And I think when one of the things that we'll probably talk about is that, when you crack through that, they start to understand a little bit more. And I really do think, I don't want to say ignorance, but it's just a lack of understanding about what homeschooling is. I think that does breed a lot of confusion.
Homeschoolers when we were kids, or earlier than that, there is a definite stereotype of what that kind of family looked like, and pre-internet days, right? So there wasn't as much connection, and you're thinking about the family with 8 kids in matching jumpers, that are all a little bit strange. That is so far from what homeschooling really was then, and it's even further from what it is now. But that's, I think, the image that sticks in everybody's mind. People around us have unbeknowingly, is unbeknowingly a word? Unbeknownst to them.
Yes.
Folks have interacted with homeschoolers and just never realized it.
Yeah, exactly.
But they only remember some interaction they had that was like, oh yeah, that person's kind of weird. Oh yeah, do you know he was a homeschooler? It's like, oh, okay. So that sticks in their mind, not the dozens of interactions they probably had with homeschooled individuals. They had no idea that they had been homeschooled.
Exactly. Yeah.
My favorite thing is like, if you meet a teenager and they're kind of, maybe socially awkward, or they just, don't fit societal norms. It's like, if they're a homeschooler, it's because they're homeschooled.
Yeah, of course.
If they were in public schools, like, well, that's just his personality. It's like, the moment it's homeschooled, it's like, well, it's homeschooling's fault. It's like, First of all, we don't all have to fit societal norms. No. Second of all, it's not dependent on the method of education that we use. Everybody is different, and that's okay. So anyway, we just wanted to give you some ideas of where these folks might be coming from. There's a lot of different places, but this is just some of their motivation.
So there's two types of people that who may be critical of this towards you. And the first type of person is somebody who you really don't want to debate or don't want to argue with, or you don't really care really what their opinion is. And how would you go and respond to those type of people?
Right. These are going to be strangers, the librarian, the guy in the grocery store, people that you really don't care about personally. You don't really know them. Mm-hmm. So that, we're going to talk all about the people that you love that are in your family. But, for these people that are, relative strangers, first thing, do not get defensive.
Yeah.
So I love all the little homeschooling memes, and I chuckle about them, about, the quippy remarks that could be made back when somebody says, oh, you're homeschooling. Aren't you going to ruin your kids? And they have some snarky response. I love all those. I chuckle at those. I think like, oh, that's such a good burn. I'd love to be able to say that in the moment, but I'm here to tell you, don't do it.
Well, because if you do get defensive and you do argue, it is going to feed back into that negative stereotype of homeschooling in their minds.
Right. Well, it's gonna feel good, right? Because you got to like give them a smart aleck reply back.
You got to clap back, as the kids say.
Yeah. Well, that totally exposed that they're being hypocritical or whatever, right?
Sure.
And I think that those responses are fun, and I do laugh at them. But really, what you're doing is just going to cause something confrontational. You're not going to leave that exchange in a positive way for you or for them. And don't get defensive.
It would be terrible.
Don't do it.
If your kids are there right with you, right? You wouldn't want to have that be
right. You don't want your quippy response to lead to some sort of confrontation with this person that you don't even know, don't care about.
Exactly.
Right. Like, so don't do it. I know that it would feel really good because I've been there when it would feel so good. Just be like, oh yeah. But don't do it. It's not really going to change their opinion or their likely future actions with another homeschooler.
And what the thing is, they're not even going to remember your interaction 15 minutes later. That's kind of the thing, right?
It's unlikely. I don't think you're not going to change their mind.
They'll remember
they're still
it if you get
going to
defensive.
Be rude to the next homeschooler. I don't think that it's worth our time to try to come up with quippy comebacks.
And we don't even know, and you may not even know that isn't something that they're saying they didn't mean to get you upset or defensive. It's just maybe that's just how they communicate about things.
People are tactless, man.
Yeah.
Right. So
now, what about you wheeling? You're an expert or a veteran of debate.
I had a lot of debate time.
What about wheeling up the podium and giving 15 minutes and taking 15 minutes and then having a resolution at the end, and with a moderator, impartial.
Yeah. When this person says something to you, don't debate. Don't debate the issue. It's just not worth it to do this in the grocery store, right? You're going to waste your time quoting statistics about homeschooling. Your
And the
reasons
person
for
you're going to
homeschooling
anger
your
the
child.
most is not your child, not you, not the person. It's the person behind you in the line.
In line. No. I mean, so
He just wants his
here's the
chicken.
thing.
He just wants his chicken dinner and his yogurt, and you're keeping him up because you're debating statistics about homeschooling.
Look, we all have statistics of why homeschoolers are more successful, why they're better, well-adjusted adults. They have better career outcomes. We could go on and on. It is not worth your time to debate this person, to give them all the reasons you're homeschooling your child, how well-adjusted, how social they are, their successes. You don't owe this person any explanation about your life at all.
Exactly.
Don't waste your time. Just don't try to get into a back and forth debate with this person. Just don't.
And it's okay not to respond, right? You don't have to say anything. There's not a requirement there.
Right. If somebody says something rude, it is okay to just act like you didn't hear them and move on with your life if that makes you feel better. I'm not saying you have to ignore them, but if you feel uncomfortable and put on the spot, we're giving you permission. You don't have to say anything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Mariners sound great. Looking good this year, guys.
It's
What?
okay. You can just walk away.
You can just say
Right?
whatever.
And later, if your kids say, wow, that somebody said something negative about homeschooling,
that's our
you could
kids.
say, you know what? That person wasn't worth our time. We just walked away. Mommy didn't want to get into it with them, so we just walked away. That's okay too. You don't owe them any explanation. If you don't want to have if you don't have something you feel comfortable saying back, sometimes, like I talk a big game in the car to myself after something has happened in the store.
Slay queen. Slay.
I do. I talk about, I'm like, I should have said this, I should have said that, and I feel really great. But I am the biggest chicken in the moment. Somebody really, gets confrontational with me and I just can get paralyzed.
Clam up.
Yeah. So really, it's okay. Just walk away.
Yeah.
If you can just do that. You don't have to answer them.
But if you are forced to respond, be courteous,
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that, if you feel this person's coming from a place of curiosity,
Yep.
then you can kindly, share some of your reasons for homeschooling, the successes your kids have had. If you think that by you explaining some of that, it's going to help that person to, they seem open to hearing it, it's going to help them to understand. We can all tell, I think, the difference between when someone sounds curious and when they sound rude and defensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes they sound rude and defensive and they really are curious, but you just don't know. I wouldn't waste my time with those people.
No, yeah.
But if you really, have somebody who is genuinely curious about it, but is maybe giving it, I'm really, so you homeschool, but what do you do about socialization? Is that a big concern for you?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have ways you get around that? You could be like, okay, it's kind of in a negative connotation, but I can tell that they're curious, right? Feel free, share some of the great successes, share how happy your family is homeschooling. That could be, you could be imparting some knowledge on that person that they didn't have, and that's great.
Yeah. So if you do want to end some of the conversations, do we have some ideas?
Right. So you do want to say something. You don't want to give them information because they don't seem curious. They were just rather rude. But we're not going to have quippy responses. What are our responses?
So you homeschool your children in your house?
I'm so thankful we each get to make the choice that's right for our family.
How do you know you want to homeschool? Isn't that kind of strange?
I know it's not the right decision for everyone, but it's right for our kids.
But what about your kids at home? Do they like it?
My children and I love homeschooling. We're happy we get so much time together.
But are your kids actually learning?
My children are flourishing with homeschooling.
I'm so bad at the bad.
Yeah,
questions.
you're really bad at being a bad actor.
Yeah, I am.
So
I'm definitely not going to get
Try
Oklahoma
out-
extra number 7.
no, you're not. Sorry, babe. We're not going to cast you.
I'm not going to cast me.
Any of these are great ways to just say you're being positive.
Yeah, right,
you're being kind. You can give one of these myriad responses and then just walk away. Yeah, my kids are flourishing homeschooling. Walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so glad we all get to make the right decision for our family. Continue checking out in the line and ignore this person, right? These are great ways for you to just sum up. You gave a response. It was positive and kind, and you have an easy exit to then turn your head and go, right? Go on with your life.
Exactly. Now, there are the people that we do care about
Yeah, that's a much harder category.
Yeah, it is. And, how do you, approach that from a starting point?
So it's really tough. It's easy to kind of be like, I don't know, we'll handle the strangers, however, right? And hopefully we handle it well in front of our kids. That's one of the things about this. When it's a family member, oftentimes we get the chance to talk to them one-on-one. It doesn't always happen in front of our kids, right? There's
Exactly.
good opportunities to kind of send our kids off. That's the hard thing about, I think, when it's strangers, is your kids are there and you really want to handle things well for them and show them,
Model good behavior.
Model good behavior for them. And you don't want them to feel like, do people think we're weird, or, so that can be really hard. But loved ones can be hard in a different way, because these are people that you love and respect, who really care about you and your kids. And usually they're usually just coming from a place of ignorance and preconceived notions that are not correct. I mean, traditionally, that's where they're coming from. If this is a person that that you respect their opinion, and they're normally not judgmental about everything. This is a case where they're legitimately concerned. Are you sure that this is a good idea? I really care about them. And this was exactly the case with your mom.
Yeah.
We told her that we were going to homeschool our older daughter when she was like, I think we had the conversation with her for the first time when she was like, maybe like 2.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I remember that we said, might have even been before she was born. We said, oh yeah, we're going to homeschool our kids. I remember she was like, well, what?
What?
And she was like, oh, guys, no, I don't. That's not a good idea. No, I don't think you should do that. I mean, homeschoolers, there was this homeschooled kid that I worked with a dozen years ago, and he's very strange, and you don't want that for your kids. You're going to put them in a good school, and I don't know why you think you need to homeschool, but this is a really bad idea. I mean, she was very, very concerned about it.
And that was, as you said, it was way early in the process. And so that's one of those things where you kind of let it just kind of roll off. You say, well, we're going to try and make the best decision and go forward. I think one of the things that we, the proof is in the pudding when we started doing some of the early curriculums.
That's right.
The early blossom and root curriculums, the torchlight curriculums that are, 3 and 4 years old. At that point, they're not actually in school. I mean, they might be in a preschool or a Montessori, but there's no pressure there. But the pressure begins to mount the closer you get to 5, 6 years old, when there's that expectation of them going into kindergarten. And I agree with you. We listened, we heard the concerns, we kind of navigated them. We ended up starting these early curriculums for the preschool curriculums. And I think that's where we were able to break through a lot of that misunderstanding, is that we were showing them what we're doing, we're showing how much time we're putting into it, and the proof was in the pudding, which is
absolutely
your kid is thriving and doing well and bright and smart and doing all the good things. And that just proves to them that, oh, this isn't a terrible option.
That's right. I think that's the great thing about having these discussions with people.
It might be harder if you have to homeschool, like if you have to make a transition from, like, say, 2nd or 3rd grade into homeschooling. That might be a little bit more of a transitional struggle with families or loved ones.
I think that's almost easier in some ways, because you're going to have taken a kid who was definitely struggling in a public school system or private school system. That's the only reason you'd pull them out, right? They were having some issues, and then you get to see this immediate change in their attitude, their anxiety, how well they're learning, their general happiness. I mean, there's some big changes that happen. So that one might almost be faster, but I think that this is the one saving grace. What we would tell you about someone you know well that loves you and your kids is that this is the long game. Even if you don't get through with them right now, you can wait it out, because eventually they're going to see how great your kids are and how wonderfully they're doing with homeschooling, and it's all going to come together. It just may take time. And that's kind of a luxury that we don't have with those people we don't know very well that are negative and critical about homeschooling. They see our kids in a snapshot, right? A glimpse at the grocery store in the middle of a school day, and think, oh my gosh, right? But our families and our close friends, they get to see our kids year after year, and they're going to be able to really see that. But it's going to maybe take a long time, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You have this great ultimate payoff, which is that they're going to see the proof in the pudding. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, their concerns are much more significant than the stranger you meet on the street.
Yeah.
So,
and it may be more, obviously, it may be a recurring concern.
That's right.
You
Somebody
may see
have to
grandma
deal
and
with
grandpa
them all
every
the
2
time.
weeks. I mean, sometimes you may not see those family members unless it's a holiday, and that's something that you can deal with. It's just a once or twice a year.
That's right.
But if you're seeing these family members, every month, every other week, that can start to wear and press down on you a little bit, on your own confidence. We have podcasts, and we'll make sure to link them in the show notes about imposter syndrome and a lot of that fear that you can have. Then this type of criticism, especially from people you care about, can really make you second guess your decision making and make you
Absolutely.
concerned that, well, maybe it isn't going to work. Maybe this
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to fail, and make you feel a little bit uncertain about what you're doing. And so I think, attacking those naysayers in the proper way that, minimizes conflict but maximizes understanding, I think is the key to that type of success.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to your friends and family, listen openly.
Yeah.
Listen honestly to the concerns that they have, right? Don't, you want to hear them out because this is somebody you really do care about changing their mind about their current opinion, right? This isn't a person on the street. You do care about what they think. So really listen to their concerns. And if you feel that they're open to listening and they're asking from a place of curiosity, then answer any valid concerns that they bring up. And this is what we did with your mom. She had a bunch of concerns, and we had an answer for all of them, right?
And this helps to have done your homework on homeschooling and knowing what it's
Exactly.
about a little. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to say, "Oh, I've read every Gatto book or Holt book." It's like you don't have to have done that, but you understand what what is. A lot of times they want to just know, like, what does the day to day look like? What's the nuts and bolts? Like, what do you use for curriculums?
Yeah.
And to be able to come to them and say, "Oh, we are going to pull the Build Your Library curriculum, where you use the public library. We're using this math curriculum, this reading curriculum. I have it all laid out, and here's some additional resources, and we have these clubs in the local area." And when you come to a conversation with your ducks in a row, I'm throwing out a lot of metaphors today, but have your ducks in a row. It really, that confidence when it comes through a discussion helps to kind of dispel any type of concern, because they see that and go, whoa, maybe my uncertainty around what you're doing is not founded, because you obviously know what you're talking about, right? And if you can come to a conversation completely preparation, I think that can help override a lot of the concern that you may get from a family member or a loved one.
It's really hard though, because sometimes they hit you when you're not expecting it, right? You could be just chatting and say, "Oh yeah, so-and-so's not doing really well in second grade. And, we're thinking about pulling him out and homeschooling, but we're just starting to look into it." Yeah. And then your mother-in-law hits you with all these questions.
Mother-in-laws.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Or your mother or your sister or your best friend. Like, what do you mean you're going to homeschool? Well, how are they going to get socialized? What curriculum are going to use? What are you going to do? Maybe you don't have any of those answers, right? Maybe you're in the very infancy and you've just been bombarded with a whole bunch of concerns. And I think that's a good point to say, I'm still in the early stages of researching this, or, still finding our way, but, this is something that we're going to try. And I think that that's one of the things that we communicated to your mom early on, right? We had done a lot of research and we did have some good answers for her questions, but ultimately at the end of it, we left it with, look, we're not signing a contract with homeschooling. Just because we make the decision to homeschool our daughter for kindergarten does not mean we will.
But secretly we did sign a contract with homeschooling.
Does not mean that we're going to be homeschooling our daughter for first grade through 12th.
Yeah.
Necessarily. It means we're gonna homeschool her for kindergarten, or even part of kindergarten, whatever it is, right? We're going to try this until it is no longer the right thing for our family.
Yeah. I think that's a good case for a lot of scenarios out there, even for the kids who are just being pulled out of, a grade because maybe they're at bullying, or they have some concerns, or maybe they had some, your child's been diagnosed with ADHD and you want to pull them home. Whatever it might be, we've had a lot of interviews with a lot of parents who've pulled their kids out midway through, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, coming into it and saying, this is a short-term thing. We're just trying to correct the ship. We're trying to right the wrong. And we're just going to see if this works for a little while. I think a lot of people say, you know what, try something for 6 or 7 months, half a year, and see what happens. I think people are pretty understanding about that. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's good, if you're even if you like, even we've been
What?
committed to homeschooling since before we were married, let alone before we were, we were planning to have children. We knew we were going to homeschool. And so when we told your mother, oh, well, we're just going to try it and do it as, we're going to try it. We were thinking in our heads, we're totally homeschooling the whole way. Right.
Totally.
But that's okay. You don't have to let them into your master plans if that's what they are. Right. Like you can just tell them, hey, this is what we're going to start with. If they're open to listening and you have the information, educate them where you can, especially about, their preconceived notions about homeschooling. I remember your mom had no idea that there were co-ops and that we could do homeschool gymnastics classes and, that there were all of these curriculums and that these things were so great, and our kindergartner is getting to do all these amazing things. She had no idea that stuff existed. And so if you can educate, take the time to do so, because that really helps them to understand, where you're coming from. I think it also really helps to tell them that, you did not enter this decision lightly. You're not being capricious. You're not just like, ugh, we had a bad week, we're homeschooling. Like I'm tired of getting up in the morning, we're homeschooling. You have had careful time and consideration about this issue, that, you've thought long and hard about it. This is the path that you want to take or something that you want to try. Because sometimes I feel like my mom's really good for this. She's like, you're going to do what? Well, it's like, whoa, Mom, I really have thought about this. You have? She acts like I haven't thought about it.
I will
Like,
neither confirm nor deny that was a wonderful impression of my mother-in-law.
Yeah, she acts sometimes like
She's like the old Cadillac starting.
yeah. Like, did you think?
Oh
this?
my God!
You can tell, like,
she's going to kill me.
Yeah, you can tell in her tone of voice that she thinks that we just like drew this idea out of a hat, whatever it is. I mean, there's been any decision we make in our lives, right? She usually acts like, and I'm always like, we've been talking about this for like a year. We've been thinking about this for a long time, or, we really, think this is the right decision. We put some careful time and heavy consideration into it. And she's like, oh. I'm like, why are you always surprised?
We're engineers, man. We've been running on a single spreadsheet for 15 years.
Well, I think it's funny that I think it's funny, not in a haha way, that people assume that that our whole lives are not about our children, right? I mean,
it's a fly-by-night operation.
Right. Like we don't all want what's best for our kids.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Whatever school you send them to, whatever educational style you choose, whatever extracurriculars you get them involved in, we do what we think is going to be best for our kids. And we don't just make rando decisions for our kids, because they're some of the most important people in our lives, right? We've got our spouse and our kids, and, they're everything to us. So It's like, why would you think that we wouldn't have taken care in making these decisions? Yeah. But for some reason they do. They think like, oh, you just like tossed it all up in the air. We're just doing this. So
trying to decide between two cars. Yeah, I'll just take that one.
I think it's crazy.
Yeah. Now, what happens if the naysayers, they don't relent, they don't yield,
so
they don't stop?
We have to accept that we may not change their mind.
Yeah.
Right. It took a while. We did not change your mom's mind overnight. As you said, it wasn't until our daughter really started showing just how great she was doing with homeschooling that your mom realized. Not only did she realize,
when I started filming our daughter doing calculus, at 6 years old, and sent it to Grandma, I said, "How do you think about that, Grandma?"
She could just see that she's intelligent and she's outgoing and she's very personable and she's very
kind,
happy,
communicative,
doing what she's doing, and all of that made her a believer. So much so, not only is she not against homeschooling anymore, she actively recommends homeschooling to other people.
Yeah.
When other friends of hers say, "Oh yeah, my granddaughter is having a problem," and so she's like, "Have you looked at homeschooling? Have they thought about homeschooling?" Right? She's now
you should listen to
an ambassador for
You should
homeschooling.
listen to my son's podcast.
Yeah.
Matthew, you got a podcast episode you can recommend me?
She doesn't sound like
a little
kind of. There's a little
Midwest,
Michigan in
little
there.
Michigan, little Midwesty.
Point is,
that's more like my aunts.
Eventually she did come around, but for a long time we had to accept
yes.
that maybe she wasn't going to be supportive of this. So as much as we're going to try to educate the people that we love about why we're doing this, and we're going to try to be calm and caring, and not get defensive about what they've said about us and our kids, we have to accept that we might not be able to change their mind, or we haven't changed their mind in this session of talking, right? There was many times that we left talking about homeschooling with your mom that she was not converted, and I had to close that conversation until inevitably the next time that it came up. So here's a couple of things that you could use if you want to just close a conversation with somebody that you love.
I just don't know if this homeschooling thing is the right thing.
I appreciate your love and concern, but we thought carefully about this, and we are going to homeschool. End.
Ariel, I just wish you would just send the kids to private school. I get it. You don't like the public school. Whatever. Send them to private school.
I understand that you don't agree with our decision, but homeschooling is right for our family.
Am I in the play?
I don't know.
You going to cast me?
I don't know. Maybe callbacks.
Oh.
We'll see. You can also always just say, we're going to give homeschooling a try, which I think is a great way to just, like you said, hey, this is something that we're just going to try.
Yeah.
They could be like, okay, maybe a little bit more accepting. But I use similar phrases each time that I had to close a conversation with your mom when she still wasn't on board with this. It was like, yeah, we've been talking about this for half an hour. I've tried to educate you. You still are coming up with, kind of wishy-washy reasons why this is a bad idea. Finally it's like, look, I know you don't agree, but this is what we're going to do. And then you just kind of got to move on, change the subject and move on.
Yeah. It's sort of like, just elope. Don't worry about the wedding, right? Always go for the backup.
I think the thing to remember with this is that if this person is close, with your family and you're going to see them often, you may need to set some boundaries, until this person comes around, which we believe. Yeah. I think I wholeheartedly believe that the proof is in the pudding, and someday those who love us and our kids are going to see for themselves that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But until that day comes, you may need to set boundaries for yourself, right? We don't need to be around that kind of negativity all the time. It may be something that you tell your mother-in-law, hey, look, we aren't going to discuss homeschooling anymore, or we aren't going to discuss it when we're around the kids, or please don't say anything negative about their lessons. They're excited about the things that they're doing. You do have to be strong and set those boundaries, because otherwise it could really bring you down, and it could really affect the mood of your kids. Our daughter realizes that she doesn't go on the school bus with the other kids on the street. She knows she doesn't go to the quote unquote regular school. And she's asked about it, and she understands that point. But nobody is actively telling her that she's weird or that we're doing the wrong thing by her. I think that if we had someone in our life that was doing that, that would be really detrimental to her mental health.
I think she would start to wonder if it was the right decision for her, or she would want to conform with the other kids a little bit more if like some other loved one was questioning what was happening to her. Yeah.
If this was happening all the time, I think it would really have an adverse effect on what is right now a very happy, well-adjusted, healthy kid who is loving homeschooling and thriving. Yeah. So know that you may have to set boundaries for a little bit, maybe for a long while, depending on how long it takes this person to get on board with what you've decided to do for your family. I mean, really, look, even if they love you, it's not their decision. These are your kids. You're doing what you think is best for your children. And it's really not up to them to have a say, but because they're in your life and they care about you, it's a really hard place to put you. Yeah. So we feel for anybody that's got family that's just not on board and vocal about it.
You can always just threaten to sell everything and move on to the boat and sail the Caribbean. If you don't stop, Mom, that's it. I'm taking Plan B. No. Now let's have some closing thoughts. Now, if you're a homeschooling family out there and you haven't had the naysayers, man, you are so lucky, because you're going to get it sooner or later.
Just expect it. It's inevitable.
It is. And it's going to come, and just be prepared for it. Just have your scenarios all mapped out. We talked about 5 or 6 of them here. They're the most common ones that we tend to run into. And if you just have a way to exit those conversations, or a way to respond, tactfully and be able to get yourself out of it, or if you have that conversation that comes up with a loved one, just have that, be able to think about how you would either educate really in a short period of time, or, deflect and move on and sail through that conversation so that it doesn't cause any disruption in your thinking or your children's thinking. If you haven't had it yet, it's coming.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Be confident. I think that being confident, as you said earlier, is really important. So hopefully this conversation will give you some confidence that you can, project forward, because some of these folks, if they sense weakness, it's like blood in the water, right?
Oh, yeah.
So don't be weak. And so that's one of the things that's a really important part of this, right? You need to project confidence. If you have any concerns, doubts, worries about your own homeschool, a naysayer is not the right person to talk with about them.
Yeah, correct.
Right? They're not going to give you good, unbiased advice and be supportive of you, because they already have a preconceived notion of the fact that homeschooling is not good.
And they're trying to get you to do something different.
Right. So, don't let there be any chinks in your armor. As far as talking to this naysayer, you're confident in your decision, you're going to try it, or your kids are doing well, or whatever, and you're just going to get out of it. But if you do have concerns, this is where you need to find that, that homeschooling bestie, or go out online onto some of the homeschooling Facebook groups. Some of those ladies are so supportive, and just tell them, like, gosh, I am worried about socialization, or I am really worried about getting into college, or, whatever your concern is, that those are good places to air those concerns. Or in your homeschool co-op, when you're sitting around with the other parents, or you have a friend who's a homeschooler, talk with those folks about those concerns. Don't let naysayers hear your legitimate concerns that you're having, because then they're just going to feed on that. And it's going to turn more negative, and you're going to just doubt yourself. And they're not going to be in a good position to give you advice anyway, because they're not homeschoolers. They don't know much about it, clearly.
I mean, just think about the practical things, like, outside of homeschooling, if you had some technical problem with your house, or some issue with your car, or even some issue with your job, or whatever you might be doing, you don't go to somebody who doesn't even know what they're talking about to help you with your car, or you don't go to somebody who, works in the tech world to help you with your job at, the office job that you're working in, or whatever, right? Like, you don't ask the physics major to help you with your English homework and vice versa. Yeah. They're not the people who are going to help you through any challenges you may have. Just as you said, find people who know what they're doing. Find people who have been doing this. We know that there are millions and millions of families out there who are successfully homeschooling their children from start to finish, and putting them into college and having them have great careers and great families and great lives. We know this is the case. Talk to those people first to help dispel any doubts or concerns or questions that you might have. The naysayers are not the people you want to be going to start off that conversation.
Having a good homeschooling mentor, and we've had homeschooling mentors that, I have called and said, gosh, I don't know about this. What do you think? We've got a friend who's put 3 boys through homeschooling, and she's always like, oh, okay, let's talk about it. She knows. Yeah. And now we're taking on that mentor relationship with other families that we're friends with, who are just exploring homeschooling. So, I think it's good. You have to have your tribe. We can't do this alone. So I think it's really important. It's also important to remember that when you hear these comments from folks, however soon you get out of the conversation, or however that goes, it's really easy to be brought down by these people. We feel it too, as much as we're prepared to, and I'm talking a big game here on the podcast. If somebody in the grocery store stops me tomorrow and is like, why is your kid not in school? You're homeschooling, you're ruining your children. I'm going to feel that, even if I say, hey, it's the right decision for us. Have a nice day. Kind of move on. Yeah. It's still gonna let doubt creep in.
So that's for you. For me, it's the very, very intelligent person online who starts saying that you're, by you not participating in the public schools, you're destroying the public school system, or
and hurting all the other families.
All the other families and stuff like that. And those type of comments are very, very. Like those are the ones that get the boiler going on me. Like, because it's coming from a really nasty place, and that really bothers me, because those are the people who might, in some respects, that I fear would in a heartbeat take away my opportunity to homeschool. The person who doesn't really know what they're talking about at the grocery store, they're not going to vote to take away homeschooling from us. It's the people who really, really know what they're doing. Those are the people that I'm really terrified of. Those are the people that get me very anxious and nervous and like fearful of what's happening. Those are the naysayers that really get to me. Yeah.
I think it's important when we hear from these folks, and it does affect us.
Yeah.
We have to be very connected with our reasons for homeschooling. We got to keep them close, so we can rely on them, when we're put in these stressful situations. We have a great episode about homeschooling purpose, where we talk about really kind of boiling down. I like to think of it like, making a sauce, and you kind of boil it down till it gets thick and syrupy and wonderful, right? Luscious. The homeschooling purpose episode, there's tons and tons of reasons why we homeschool. We've got dozens and dozens of reasons, but the purpose of that show is to really help us narrow down on what is most important, what is at the core of why we homeschool. So I think connecting with that, listen to that episode if you haven't, really connect with that and why you homeschool, because it's something that you can hold close to your heart. When somebody says something negative, I'm thinking in my heart about the very reason why we homeschool, that I really want my children to have a childhood that is full of imagination and wonder and takes them where they want to go and not where someone else decided they want to go. That's one of the reasons it's really important to me. And so I can keep that close. So I think if you can rely on that in those situations, it's really good not to flounder, because you just know in your core why you're here.
One other takeaway is we want to remember that we may be the only homeschoolers that these people might interact with, and we
ever,
and
or that they know about. Anyway.
And we want to make sure that their experience with their first homeschoolers they ever interact with is a good one, so that they may turn around and the next time they interact with a homeschooler, they'll remember you and say, "Well, those people were really nice. Those kids were really
That's
nice."
Right.
Maybe that is a good option for you. So if you can go out there and live your life as an example to others in a positive way, that I think that can help spread the good word of homeschooling to other folks, especially those just kind of strangers you might run into. I think it's really important to have that kind of solid, peace, happy, kind, respectful manner. I think that can really spread the good news of homeschooling.
Yeah, I think we all need to be ambassadors for homeschooling.
Yeah, exactly.
When somebody hears that we're homeschoolers, and legitimately, many of the people who have negative things to say, including members of our own family, have never actually met a homeschooler. They just had lots of negative things to say.
Yeah.
So we're the first ones that they would meet and talk with. So, and that may be the case for you too. And that means your voice is so important. Yeah. We all need to be ambassadors.
And be kind at the same time, right?
Right. We're setting an example for our kids of how to behave when somebody is, on the attack too. So it's really, really important to remember that this person may have never even talked with a homeschooler before. You may be the first one. So represent us well.
Yeah, you got to. Next thing is, if you do have to get into a debate with somebody, whoever that might be, be firm, but
firm but kind.
Firm but kind, and I think that would probably be the best way to go through it, whether it's a family member or somebody in the wild. Being firm and confident in who you are, and deflecting the conversation away if you can see it kind of going south, or even just deflecting yourself out of the conversation altogether is probably the best path to go. A lot of people, it's hard for people to give up ideas that they've held for a long time, a long period. There's kind of like an intellectual capital that it's hard to overcome. If they have a preconceived notion that something is not good, or if something is a problem, it's really hard to convince people, within a short conversation that they're wrong.
Absolutely.
A lot of times, we talked a little bit earlier that the best way to do that is to show them who you're, what you're doing, show them, that you're doing a good job with your kids. That sometimes is the best way to prove people wrong. It's very often you're never going to debate somebody out of their idea.
No, it's very rare. You're not going to really change their mind right there. I mean, maybe if it's a family member and they're really open, maybe. Or it's a stranger who's very curious. I mean, there are definitely those folks.
Yeah, those curious folks, absolutely.
Just remember that normal, regular, all those type of words, it's okay to not be normal. It's okay to not go with the flow. It's okay to not do what everybody else does. It's some folks will call you out on that. Their whole naysaying is just that you're being different, and different is okay. That's an okay way to be. And I think we all have to be very comfortable with being different, because we've purposely chosen a path that is not the normal flow that everybody, they turn 5 and they go to kindergarten. We're choosing something different. And so we're going to have to accept that part of it as well. Find those people in your homeschooling tribe that are going to counter these folks with negative opinions, and don't let them get to you. I guess if there's one takeaway, don't let these people get to you. Because it can be really hard to hear these negative things about your choices with what you did for your kids. But in the end, they have no right to tell you that you're not doing the right thing. Yeah. They have no business trying to insert themselves in what you think is best for your family. So be confident, but be kind.
And we thank you for letting us be part of your tribe and letting our community be part of that.
That's right.
Go out and find communities that work for you.
And you know what? If you're having a hard time, send us a message. I am always ready to pump up another homeschooling parent who's having a rough day and thinks that, somebody is just not being supportive of their decision. So we can all be there for each other. And I think that's important too. If you're around other homeschooling parents and you hear somebody talking about how they've had a naysayer account, give them a prop up. I think we need to all support one another in this alternative journey that we're taking.
And the one last thing, I think the thing that's been best about the naysayers has not been anything that we could have said or done or shown, but the pandemic really helped push a lot of those naysayers right out the window.
What's interesting, because people who had never before met a homeschooler, many people now have homeschooled or know somebody who had homeschooled.
20% of the country, I think, at one point was homeschooling.
Yeah, even just for a little bit of the time. So it definitely makes things easier. But there's plenty of those folks who have not had any experience with it that are still gonna express their loud opinion about what you've chosen to do with your kids. And we hope that this has given you some tools in your toolbox to use when that inevitably happens. And we're sorry that it's going to happen to you at some point. You're going to be put in that situation because it's stressful. I hate confrontation. Yeah. I'm like such a chicken. I really do. I talk a good game, but I hate it when somebody comes up and wants to be confrontational about something. And so we hope this gives you some ideas, and we're sorry in advance.
So this was a really good episode. I really enjoyed talking about these type of like meta conversations that we all are going to run into, but let's end this the way we always do. The thing that we're into, Ariel, we had a podcast about 3 or 4 episodes ago about a little game that was bought by the New York Times called Wordle.
Yes.
And we have been into a spin-off. There have been many clones of this game, but there's a new one that's a geography-based one. It's called Worldle.
It's really hard to say.
Hard to say, Worldle, and we'll have a link in the show notes below. But basically, this is a geography game. Same idea about guessing the word. You have in Wordle, you have 5 words, 5 letters.
5 letters. So that's letters in Worldle.
In Worldle,
Worldle, you have a black and white outline of a country.
Yes.
So it's just the shape. You don't know what size it is. And so you get to guess the names of countries. Helpfully, as you start to type in the name of the country,
they autofill.
It gives you guesses. So I don't have to spell Zimbabwe correctly, which is really a blessing. So you don't have to spell the country correctly, but you choose as you start to type in, and you can choose the country. And then it tells you what percentage right you are. And it tells you, if you
from the country you guessed,
the
direction you really needed to go, and how far away it is.
Right.
So, for example, we had the one, I think it was, I guess
Venezuela the other day.
No, I guess Romania. No, it was the one that was, I guess Romania.
Oh.
And then it said, no, it's to the east about 8,000 kilometers. I go, oh, Cambodia.
Right. Because your country shapes.
Well, and then was it yesterday? Well, yeah, it was Venezuela yesterday, and then today it was Iceland.
Iceland was a little easier because we've been to Iceland. Yeah. But it's really fun. It's great if you want to play with your kids, and you can say like, okay, here's the shape of the country. They can look around the world.
What's great too is
like
they can give an initial guess. They can guess anything. They always guess Canada. And then you pull out the map, and it will tell you go southeast by 10,000 kilometers, and so you roll the globe and you look for the country and then they can enter in that country.
We've been having a ball with this game. It's just a free online web-based game. There's no sign-in or anything like that needed. And there's only one a day, just like the original Wordle. So now Worldle has got just one a day. We've been having a blast with it. We do it every day, and it's been great. We're doing this around the world study with our daughter, with Torchlight Zero and Torchlight K and Build Your Library Zero. And so this is just fit in right away. It was like, oh, it's this country. And one of the things I like about it is it doesn't tell you what size. So you see the country, it's like that could be Canada or it could be North Macedonia. Like it could be that big or that tiny. Yeah. Like there's no sense of scale given on the outline. Yeah. So anyway, I've been having a ball with it. So for you folks who have geography lovers out there, Worldle is a great game.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!